Greetings. My name is Dr. D'Angelo Taylor, and I am the Assistant Director of the Multicultural Center here at the University of Southern Indiana. As we continue to celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we have enlisted some of the best and brightest students to provide an original oration which covers the life and legacy of Dr. King, as well as this year's theme, the fierce urgency of now. Each of these students has participated in the annual Black History Month oratorical competition hosted here at USI. I hope that you enjoy their reflections. Thank you.
In 1967, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now." In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is a such thing as too late. There is no time for apathy or complacency. This is the time for vigorous and positive action. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a true visionary. He saw a future of equality even when those around him did not. He exhibited outstanding work and success for what he achieved, including winning the Nobel Peace Prize for America's struggle for racism in 1964. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. organized and led marches for social equality and was not afraid to stand up and commit to action to inspire diversity. His inspiration created an everlasting memory to not only minorities, but to the entire nation as a whole. Most importantly, he inspired the nation that change was possible, yet it required work and vigorous action. As we approach the day when we celebrate his life and legacy and what he stood for, we must realize what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. meant when he described a fierce urgency of now. For every family who faces financial struggles every day and prays for a better tomorrow, there is a fierce urgency of now. For every step marched for racial justice for the movement and its support, there is a fierce urgency of now. For every ballot submitted for those who chose to use their voices and because every voice matters, there is a fierce urgency of now. For every life that was lost due to COVID-19, there is a fierce urgency of now. Now is not the time for separation and altercation. Now is the time to unite and fight for the dream that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamt and envisioned. And now, 50 years after the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his legacy and inspiration continues to live on in those called to action, on in those who relentlessly fight for racial and social justice and for social equality. The University of Southern Indiana is a powerhouse. The students on this campus are unmatched. When banded together, we are unstoppable. From education to sports, extracurriculars to innovative research, the USI Screaming Eagles know how to commit. So I ask you all this. Let's commit to action. Let us not remain complacent, yet instead driven. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, we are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is a such thing as being too late, because now is the time. We live in unprecedented times. 2020 was a year unexpected, but yet we made it. Let us use yesterday's lesson as tomorrow's progression. Let us be the people who push ourselves to the max. Let us face the labels and inspire change. Let us face the odds and defy them as we face today for a better tomorrow, because together we can face anything.
Discrimination is a destructive force in America that has made its home in this country since its very inception. We've allowed it to exist and unfold in a way that now splits this nation apart. But of course, the oppressed cannot be held responsible for the malice of the oppressors. 3 years ago, I was tasked with writing a speech for an event commemorating this holiday, and I did so again last year. Recently, I read both pieces in an effort to reflect on the development of our circumstances and found that in the span of those few years, conditions have since deteriorated even more so up until now. However, I believe that resiliency shines brightest following the darkest of days. Throughout the last 4 years, we have witnessed the normalization of hatred and racism. Our country has reverted to open bigotry and manifested for itself a cold culture of prejudice as a result. but the pot has boiled over. With new leadership, many's faith in progress is renewed. The events of this past year have sparked more unrest and outspokenness than possibly ever before. Protests have surged across the country, while people of all backgrounds have banded together in support of one another. These past 4 years have reminded us of America's ugliest side, but the way we have responded has reminded others of our willingness to stand up in the face of injustice. In order to propel the push for progress, we must avoid complacency and continue to fight the good fight for equality. This Martin Luther King Day gives us each a chance to reflect not only on the legacy of Dr. King in his own era, but also on how we can apply his practices and teachings in our own times. While he undoubtedly accomplished monumental change for African Americans, the battle is still yet to be won. It is our duty to build on his achievements and use his lifetime of work as a strong foundation to try and liberate communities of color from the shackles of inequity. Police have consistently been allowed to harass, brutalize, and murder black and brown people with little to no repercussions. After the martyrdom of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, the uproar can no longer be ignored. The message has spread throughout all platforms, from social media and professional sports all the way to the legislative halls of our state capitals. For some, however, it is apparently too difficult to utter the words "Black Lives Matter." It is as if they no longer care to conceal their contempt. But black lives do matter, and without question, black voices matter. Seeing organizations like the NBA putting Black Lives Matter in big letters across the hardwood was encouraging, especially after the mishandling of the situation by the NFL following Colin Kaepernick's symbolic pregame kneeling. While seemingly small efforts help to keep the conversation alive, what tends to have a greater impact is the actual effort to effect change by real people. After the callous shooting of Jacob Blake in front of his children in Kenosha, Wisconsin, the players of the Milwaukee Bucks refused to take the court. Their protest caused a ripple effect throughout the league, halting games entirely. They demanded their voices be heard, leading to meetings with owners who then facilitated calls directly to state legislators. This example demonstrates the potential of people to use their talent and power for the greater good. Unfortunately, Blake's shooter, Rustin Sheskey, along with the rest of the officers present, were spared of all charges. Blake will be paralyzed for the rest of his life, while Sheskey will walk free. This verdict came as another punch to the gut, but this kind of outcome has been repeated so many times by judicial courts in the U.S. that the news was far from shocking. Trust for law enforcement has been destroyed due to the lack of accountability in place. Officers' freedom to abuse their authority and get away with it has enabled the countless tragedies that have devastated black families for far too long. It is each and every one of our responsibilities to use our voices and abilities to eradicate systematic racism once and for all. As we approach Black History Month, it is crucial that we acknowledge the necessity and urgency for change. We as a society must call the sideline spectators into the game. There is no neutrality anymore. Either you stand for black lives or you stand against them. How many more mothers have to lose their children so people might understand? At this point, those who are ignorant to the facts are willfully allowing themselves to be. We cannot rest until we have proper reformation, so I implore that we hold ourselves to stand for something, or else we might just fall for anything. One of my main role models, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, otherwise known as Malcolm X, once said, "We declare our right on this earth to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary." As he said, we will assuredly bring about change. We will achieve equality, and we will have justice for the oppressed by any means necessary. Thank you.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a force to be reckoned with. He took America by storm with his passionate oratory and his fervent activism. He led marches, boycotts, protests, demonstrations, and more. He was absolutely instrumental to the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. His leadership propelled the Montgomery bus boycott and the Memphis sanitation workers strike, and he also helped establish the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. His dream rang throughout Washington and can still be heard today. His words written in a jail cell in Birmingham, Alabama, are perhaps some of the most powerful ever written on race relations in the United States. He challenged us to redefine activism, justice, morality, and patriotism. And he did all of these things in only 13 years. Today, our country is facing the greatest threat to democracy and justice we have seen in the modern time. We are opposing fascism, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and all other forms of bigotry and hatred. And now more than ever, many Americans are feeling called to be more like Dr. King in response to the fierce urgency of now. In 4 years, millions have taken to the streets to protest injustice in all aspects of our society. Millions more cast their ballots in the most important election of our lifetime, many doing so for the first time. Americans have been uniquely moved to write, speak, read, march, teach, learn, and otherwise better themselves to oppose injustice. But many other Americans stand frozen in their tracks, overwhelmed by the daunting task at hand. It can be scary standing tall as an anti-racist, especially at a time when racism seems to be thriving at every level. However, no one expects you to be the next Dr. King. You do not have to single-handedly pass legislation or boycott an important service or be beaten by police. You do not need to devote your entire life to activism in order to make a difference. Dr. King himself said, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward." So today I implore you, move forward. Move forward by reading an article to educate yourself on something you may be unfamiliar with. Move forward by having conversations about racism and current events with your friends and loved ones. Move forward by casting your ballot in every single election, not just the presidential ones. Move forward by supporting Black artists, musicians, and businesses. Move forward by paying attention to events happening in your community. An individual's impact is strongest at the local level. Move forward by attending protests and demonstrations if you are able. Your presence is vital, even if it doesn't feel like it. Move forward by writing or calling your elected officials about important issues. Move forward by donating a few dollars to grassroots organizations who are working to fight the good fight. Move forward by being present. You may be just one person, one vote, one voice, but you have the ability to move our entire country forward, if you choose to do so. Dr. King fundamentally changed this entire nation in only 13 years. So ask yourself, what can you do with just one moment of your time?
This past year, 2020, we saw a lot of protests all over the world for different reasons. From illusory reasons like anti-lockdown to real issues like global racial justice. In America, most influential people like celebrities, athletes, and big business owners stood in support for racial justice in America. For example, the NBA players boycotted playoff games in frustration of another shooting of an unarmed black man. Blackout Tuesday, created by the music industry, was one of the ways people were able to show solidarity for the fight against racial injustice. Although the initiative was met with some confusion, the main goal of allowing your followers on social media to see that you support the movement was achieved. Now, after all that has happened in the past year, what now? See, for years, America has taken the easy approach towards the very much complicated issue of racial injustice. This is why we see some of the injustices faced by Black Americans over 50 years ago is still prevalent to this day. Now more than ever, we must face the issue head on instead of taking the easy way out. The late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King stated during an interview, and I quote, "It is much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee an annual income, for instance, to get rid of poverty for all Negroes. It is much easier to integrate a bus than it is to make genuine integration a reality." This statement still holds true till today. It is much easier to change the name of a football team than it is to guarantee a coach of color for a football team. It is much easier to post on Blackout Tuesday than it is to help Black businesses and communities on Tuesdays. It is much easier to believe all lives matter than to acknowledge that Black lives matter. We can pat ourselves on the back for the little accomplishments we have acquired. But there's still much more work to be done. We should not and will not settle for the little gains. We must keep the fight going, and we must act now. Now, America. Now, not later, not 15, 10, or 5 years from now. Not when another major incident happens to where everybody is outraged and then we decide to take action. We need to follow in the footsteps of those before us and be proactive, not reactive. Educate yourself. Have those tough conversations because this is the way we move forward as a people. We will continue to fight until there is justice for all in every aspect of our lives. The pushback that we might get might make it seem like this is an unattainable goal, but this is not the case. This just means we need to fight harder to make the world a better place. We must not lose hope. We must show those that choose to be ignorant that we are not giving up. Our ancestors fought for us to be here today, and we will fight for the next generation to be in a better place. I assure you it will not be easy, but with fierce urgency, we can make sure that the dream of the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King does not die. Thank you.
No justice, no peace. Hate continues to increase. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "I have a dream," speaking for a future we would work on as a team. He said, "The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges." I say this is still the case. Injustice is alive and well, triggering people a wide array of urges. People of color continue to experience the cruelty of the justice system in the nation. I hope you hear my perspective, so please feel my frustration. A person of color set up for failure from the moment they are born. Things are not just given, they have always been earned. To understand my message, let's take a look at the past, at the folks that first spoke up. They will never be the last. Harriet Tubman freed over 100 of slaves. She was tired of seeing them go straight to the grave. Henry Brown made it to freedom by thinking inside the box. He traveled by sea, going from dock to dock. Frederick Douglass escaped to freedom and became famous for his work. He became a notorious abolitionist and writer, and this was a perk. The chains on the slave became the cuffs on a black man. Don't deny the statement, this is how it began. BLM protesters have been arrested, and the Proud Boys wondering what else to do. This is a living statement, and I know you know it too. George Floyd, Rashad Brooks, Breonna Taylor, and Tamir Rice say their name now and forever because they didn't have to pay the price. Innocent people died, and no justice has been served. I can't breathe due to everything I have observed. We cannot forget the things that have taken place these past 4 years. I am over these historical moments. It is seen through my tears. People of color experience this frequent oppression. It's been more than enough. This ain't no confession. I am mad. I am sad, and I am filled with different rages. Be loud, be bold. This needs to go down in history pages. We need to get in trouble. The good trouble that makes the change. I do not care what people say, even if it is seen as strange. We need to reclaim the power that falls into our hands, make sure we tell our democracy exactly where they stand. We need to hold our officials accountable to their governing acts. We have to make sure they tell us the truth, just straight to the facts. We need to fix this political system so equity, equality, and inclusion are included. Make sure it accounts for all and not have the people of color secluded. We cannot care for all lives until we help the Black lives. Trace the origin of the problem deep in the archives. We cannot ignore the events that take place in our backyards. We must act on these events and learn to play the cards. A person of color should be able to run whenever they want and not get killed. Our pleas have been piling up, still being unfulfilled. A Black little boy should be able to play with their toy cars, not training what to do in the case of a what if. Is no one else upset about this? Is no one else feeling stiff? Why can't we tell that Black little boy to grow up and be successful? Is it because the white little boy got everything that should have been helpful? We need to stop giving love only to our race. We must do it. If not, we give space to discriminate. We need to make MLK's dream come true 58 years later, and we still have so much to do. Until justice is served for you and me, we must fight the fight. It won't be a clear road. Please, I beg you to hang on tight. Continue to aspire, look for answers and question figures. Change starts with ourselves, just look into the mirrors. We have to make this world a better place, take all the hate away, clean up its every trace. Until then, no justice, no peace will be the motto till the day I die. It will serve as a reminder to always ask why. I have a dream that one day we fulfill MLK's dreams, but in order to do, we must acknowledge all these screams. My friends, there is a fierce urgency of doing everything right now. It starts by seeking justice. We will figure it out somehow. Our 30-day trial is almost coming to an end. 2021, what is the message that you will send?